Om Tat Sat. Welcome to Gyan Bhakti. We are currently exploring the scripture Mysticism of Srimad Bhagavatam. Commentary is by my Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayananda ji Maharaj, narrated by myself, Swami Nikhilananda. So let's get started for today's Satsanga. We will be covering the episode of The Punishment of Daksha by Lord Shiva. Once in ancient times, Daksha, a Prajapati or sub-creator, was presiding over a conference of sages and gods. When he entered into that assembly, everyone stood up to give respect to Daksh Prajapati, everyone except Brahma and Shiva. Since Brahma was Daksha's father, it was understood, according to the accepted cultural norms, that he would stay seated. However, Daksha was deeply offended because Shiva did not get up to show him respect. In Daksha's mind, Shiva, the husband of Daksha's daughter Sati, was his son-in-law. Daksha therefore became angry and started uttering words that were displeasing to Shiva. He said, "You have become like my son, having married my daughter. How dare you not stand and offer your salutations to me? When I gave my daughter to you, I was hesitant. You abide with ghosts, dwell in terrible cremation grounds, move like a mad person, and wear inauspicious adornments like the garlands of skulls on your neck. People call you Shiva, which means auspicious, but actually you are Ashiva or inauspicious. I regret having married my daughter to you." In spite of all this, Shiva kept seated, unconcerned, unaffected. Daksha then declared that from then on Shiva would not be given a share in any type of yajna, nor be invoked in any ritual performance of Vedic sacrifices. So, this is where even gods are tested. You have to be cool and calm under pressure. So, we as humans know if we fail, we should continue to try more to achieve our objective of spirituality. Having uttered these words, Daksha walked out of the assembly in great anger. One of the attendants of Shiva, known as Nandishvara, who was portrayed as a bull in Shiva's temple, became angry when he heard these words against his lord and master. Immediately, Nandishvara cursed Daksha, saying, "This Daksha is dull-witted. May he develop an animal head, since he no longer deserves to have a human one." So it's important to see how the ego principle within us raises its ugly head when we attain name and power, which is what we see what happened to Daksha. He could not understand the deeper nature of Lord Shiva himself. He was only looking at the external form and the external events. In return, harsh words were spoken against Nandishvara and Shiva by some of the Brahmins who were devoted to Daksha, because they were getting paid by Daksha and to do the havan for him. Thus the assembly dispersed in an atmosphere of great disharmony. From that time, Daksha held a grudge against Shiva and even developed ill will towards his own daughter Sati. One day, after a long time had passed, Sati saw so many aerial cars flying through the air. After inquiry, she learned that her father was performing a great sacrifice. Feeling a desire to visit her family, Sati expressed her wishes before Shiva, her husband. Shiva warned her that she would not be welcome and that her visit would be disastrous. However, when Sati could not be dissuaded, Shiva allowed her to go, accompanied by some of his attendants. When Sati entered Daksha's assembly hall, she saw that all the gods had been given special seats, but there was no seat reserved for Shiva. This revelation that Shiva had no place in Daksha's sacrifice caused Sati great pain, and she vowed, "This body of mine that is born of Daksha will no longer exist, and I will reject any relationship or affinity with Daksha." Thus saying, Sati entered into Samadhi, and immediately a fire blazed forth from her body, consuming her to ashes. There was an outcry of grief from all sides, and all those who were attending the sacrifice were greatly distressed at the sight of Sati's death. So, what a tragedy occurred. Instead of Havan and something auspicious, something extremely inauspicious happened. In the ensuing confusion and agitation, Shiva's attendants rushed forward with weapons raised, intent upon killing Daksha, because he was the cause of killing his own daughter, who was Shiva's wife. However, they were quickly dispersed by special forces of the gods. So as soon as Shiva heard of Sati's death, he became enraged, and from a lock of his own matted locks, he created a terrible warrior called Veerbhadra to be the chief of his forces and destroy Daksha and his sacrifice. This Veerbhadra and the army of Shiva's attendants descended upon the sacrificial hall with a vengeance and began to ravage the sacrifice. They punished all those who had encouraged Daksha in his disrespect to Shiva, breaking noses, plucking out mustache, beards, eyes, and teeth. Then Veerbhadra turned to Daksha, severed his head from his body, and offered up that head as an oblation in the sacrificial fire. After burning down the sacrificial hall, the warriors returned to Shiva's abode back in Kailash. Those who had suffered at the hands of the attendants of Shiva quickly sought out Brahma for help. While Daksha's sacrifice had been going on, Brahma and Vishnu had stayed away, knowing that because of Daksha's conceit, there could surely be trouble. So they had sensed it a bit ahead of time. After hearing about the events in the hall, Brahma suggested that they all go to Shiva and seek his forgiveness. Since the moment you turn to Shiva, he is pleased, and all that has gone wrong is forgotten. That is why Shiva's other name is called Bholenath. Bhole means innocent, which means he doesn't keep anything in his mind, anger, jealousy, and that I won't speak to you for a long time. Nothing like that. He is just, at the moment he gets punishes, now the punishment's over, he's back to his normal self, which means he truly forgives. Thus Brahma, along with the Prajapatis and the deities, all set out for Kailasha mountain, hoping that Shiva would allow the recommencing of the sacrifice needed for the creation process to continue. So when Shiva saw Brahma approach, he stood up in absolute humility to welcome him. After offering prayers and speaking to the glory of Shiva, Brahma said, "O Lord, now Daksha has been well punished." So Daksha is the son of Brahmaji himself, and Brahmaji understood that his son deserved the punishment. So we should always follow the path of righteousness, even if it applies to our own son. And ego needs to be sublimated, in which case sometimes we forget that fact. Let his yajna be successful, said Shiva. And he requested, Prajapati is requesting Lord Shiva now. Let all those people who join the yajna recover from the losses and injuries they received. So Brahmaji was trying to create that inauspicious event back into something salvageable and auspicious. So Lord Shiva smiled and said, "I do not remember anyone's misdeeds. I have no place in my mind for such things." What a beautiful teaching that is for all of us. And why Shiva had not stood up initially when everybody else did is because Shiva is pure, innocent, and truthful. He did not want to stand up to respect Daksha and to respect power and ego. So he did not agree with that. Therefore, he did not see any point in being hypocritical and showing respect to Daksha. Of course, Daksha was not at that spiritual state. So obviously, he got very annoyed and his ego got further tarnished and he got angry. Thus, this whole episode happened. So, I simply gave, Shiva said, a little punishment to Daksha for his own good. But since his head is gone, where does the pride, ego, and all these things lie? In our head. I mean, that's where most of the things are. So he said, I will have a goat head put on his body, and he will come back to life and be able to operate with that head. So, although he was unsalvageable, he was dead, Shiva brought him back to life to help humanity so that the subcreation aspect could continue. Thus appeased, Lord Shiva saw to it that all the deities and devotees that had been injured in Daksha's hall were healed in an appropriate manner. Then the sacrifice began anew and was successfully completed with Shiva receiving his proper respect. So with this we conclude our satsang for today, and we will study the mystical meaning of this interesting episode in tomorrow's satsang. This is Swami Nikhilananda. Om Tat Sat.